Good day, I'm Dr. T and welcome to my office. So I want to bring you along on kind of a conversation I'm starting to think about and kind of noticing it's a conversation that we're not having in terms of AI policies within education. And that conversation is going to be AI or maybe anti-AI countermeasures is maybe a better way of describing this, and students who are neurodivergent or English language learners. Because a lot of what I've seen is kind of an anti-AI countermeasure are things that they're not going to be particularly good for students with either disabilities, possibly neurodivergent or English language learners. And there needs to be more conversation about accessibility in these spaces. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I am a chemistry senior lecturer. I work at a modest size public university in the American Southeast. I am also dyslexic. I was diagnosed the summer before third grade. So I've been teaching for 15 years, a little bit less, and I've been diagnosed as dyslexic for a little bit less than 35 years. I'm getting old. Anyways, so let's kind of talk a little bit, I guess, about why there are anti-AI countermeasures and why we have this whole problem to start with. So there's a couple of reasons. Some are good, some are less good. I do feel that there's definitely a little bit of, well, back in my day, we didn't have this, you shouldn't do this, that kind of stuff going on, kind of fear of the new. And keep in mind, AI has grown so fast in, what, 2 years? We're coming up on the second anniversary of ChatGPT going public, or going live to the general public. So things have changed a lot and very, very, very fast. However, there are some much more legitimate concerns. Kind of going into that same spaces, cheating your way through college, etc. The two kind of primary issues. The first is maybe a little bit more K-12 area, and the second is probably a bit more college. For starters, AI can greatly flatten learning curves. So it can take something that is really hard and can make it quite simple. That's generally a good thing, except for AI doesn't flatten the whole curve. So instead of having a nice gradual slope up, AI is able to flatten the first, 2/3, 3/4, and then all of a sudden it goes straight up. Because now the AI can't do it, but you haven't gotten strong enough in doing it yourself to be able to do this. The metaphor I usually like to think of is, if you're walking up a hill, let's say it's a 35-foot hill, it's 350 feet, horizontal, you're walking for every 10 foot over, you're going a foot up. That's not too bad. But if we were to flatten the first 300 feet, so you don't go up at all, that would be easier to walk that first 300 feet, but now you got a 30-foot cliff. And AI can do the same scenario. And I've definitely got some feedback between AI, Chegg, a few other sources of individuals, shall we say, cheating their way through, and then all of a sudden realizing that they can't go forward and they've really messed themselves up. And of course, students are typically younger, not always. We've got our non-traditional students, but a lot of people, especially in their earlier years, maybe not thinking ahead, maybe not realizing how hard they could potentially get burned if they do this. And so there's a little bit of a tension between, well, do we try and prevent them by forcing them to do it the way that's best for them? Or do we say, you know what, forget it, you get burned, you get burned. If this ruins your life, not my problem. I can see it both ways. That said, so that's kind of the first issue. And in my mind, the biggest problem. And I should caveat, on those areas where AI is able to completely flatten the curve, there is kind of the other issue of if the student, once they become an employee somewhere, if they can't do better than the AI, if they cannot value add on top of the AI, why are they there? Why would anyone hire someone when they could just pay for an AI? The AI's gotta be cheaper than an employee. Employees are dreadfully expensive. So the student needs to learn ways to add value to what they're doing. That's absolutely essential. And So they either have to be better than the AI or they have to learn to use AI as a tool. In more of the college setting, I do feel the AI as a tool is definitely something we need to be thinking and talking about. In K-12, I can definitely see you got to get high enough where you're getting enough skill that you can use the AI as a tool, and the flattening of the learning curve can become a major issue, or the partial flattening of the learning curve become a major, major issue. The other issue ends up being, once again, less so for K-12, but more so for college, that if you're able to use alternative ways of getting things done, instead of learning how to do them and developing skills, and then one is able to graduate, now all of a sudden you have a degree, you're effectively certified that you know this stuff, and if you don't, that can lead to some rather awkward situations. Once again, get yourself in hot water, but also that reflects very badly on the university or college, as well as all the other alumni. So basically you're devaluing, or I shouldn't say you, this hypothetical person who has effectively cheated their way through education is devaluing the degree that they have earned. And so that has this significant collateral damage to other individuals. We're kind of seeing this in K-12. This is one of the reasons that I'm hearing that a lot of companies are like, well, you have to have the college degree for random thing that has no reason to need a college degree because too many people have just been passed along in K-12. Now, that's a whole nother kettle of fish that I don't really want to dive into, but definitely a concern we have where we want to make sure people actually meet the skills that we are saying that they meet. Okay. So that's kind of the gist of why we might want to have some anti-AI countermeasures. But here's where things get a little bit more complicated, and accessibility is usually where things get a little bit more complicated. For starters, there are some countermeasures that are just problematic on the surface. For starters, the classic one where you hide in one point, white on white font, some ridiculous set of directions. Okay, if you have a visually impaired student, they're going to almost certainly be reading it with, say, a screen reader. That screen reader, as well as the AI, is going to pick up that font. You've now just caught the visually impaired student in your dragnet because you've said to use the word banana on every fifth sentence, or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, works great, except for you get false positives. You get people who actually wrote them themselves, and you did say to use the word banana on every fifth sentence, so they are just doing what they were told. And it gets to the point where, they have to now prove their innocence because, the whole innocent until proven guilty thing is, let's just be honest, more ideal than what's actually practiced in a lot of cases. That's not right, but it is what it is. Now, let's jump into some of a little bit more areas where I'm a little bit more specifically interested, that are a little bit less obvious. For starters, I've tried doing some Google Scholar searches, and I was interested after a post on r/dyslexia about this, a student saying that they were being flagged repeatedly, even though they were not using an AI of any sort, as being, using AI. And so I was looking, I was like, okay, do AI detectors more commonly flag neurodivergent individuals or individuals with, say, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, or quite a few other differences in thinking? Or maybe AI detectors potentially flag English language learners a bit more. In both cases, we could imagine vocabulary being a little bit unusual. I remember a while back, earlier this day, which that was a rather awkward phrasing, wasn't it? I remember earlier today, I was trying to write a sentence about something on this topic of AI detectors catching a certain topic, and I couldn't get the word catch correct. English is annoying. If you spell out a word the way it sounds, you have a 50-50 chance of it actually, having a spelling close enough that the spell check or even some AIs can catch. And Grammarly and Word were not catching catch in this case. They were all thinking I meant check. It's like, I don't mean check, I want catch. So I ended up having to Google play catch with my son and cut and paste that in. Okay, so that may very well lead me to choose, and does very often lead me to choose words that are somewhat awkward because I can't get this stupid word spelled right. I have spent 5 minutes trying to get this word close enough that the computer can figure out what I intend. I just have to reword my entire sentence so I don't use that word because I can't. That is just not happening today. And there are definitely certain words that do that. Truth be told, I probably should have fired up a text-to-speech engine, sorry, a speech-to-text engine, and just dictated that at this point. But let's be honest, those are a little bit flaky. They're better than they used to be. And there are situations where you don't want to be dictating to your computer in, say, the middle of the library or something, or in the middle of class. That would be a bit problematic. Okay, so awkward wording either because just the way you think, maybe you're learning the language, or you're just having a problem with the words and the words just ain't wording. Would this get flagged by AI? And so I started hitting up Google Scholars, like, what's the peer review? I don't know if there is no peer-reviewed literature on this, or I'm simply being swamped by various peer-reviewed topics of similar sounding terms, such as using AI to diagnose dyslexia, or how AI can be used to help individuals who are learning English. And the battery light's flashing on the camera, so I better stop talking, switch the batteries out here. 1 second. Okay, new battery. Let's see where I was. Okay, so I'm doing some Google Scholar searches, and basically I'm getting swamped. I can't find what I'm looking for. What I do find is several papers talking about AI detectors and how different AI detectors are wildly vary in quality and number of false positives, which is something I've seen before myself. A while back with another argument on the internet, I had typed in a few chapters of the King James Bible into various AI detectors, and it ranged everywhere from 0% AI written to 100% AI written. There was actually 3 detectors. It was a 50, 100, and a 0. Which presumably the King James Bible was not written by AI. If it was, that's really interesting. So, yeah, so ignoring weird theological implications, presumably those are false positives. And the general consensus was the AI detectors vary wildly between types. And the papers I had skimmed through were doing more than just 3 random detectors I found on the internet. And the general thought was the false positive rate is relatively low, but not low enough. So basically, AI detectors flagging on something is evidence that it's AI, but it's not proof. I wasn't able to find information about AI detectors and English language learners. I think I did see one paper that I probably can't find again that suggested that there wasn't an issue, but basically it was that the AI detectors are so bad that it flags on native speakers and English language learners both way too often. So this is kind of using AI detectors honestly just sounds like it's not a good idea. And I don't know if there's research, I suspect there's not currently research with respect to are AI detectors worse at accurately detecting AI use or detecting the lack of AI use for individuals who are, say, neurodivergent or English language learners or in some other minority group. Hey, me from the future, I forgot something. Remember when I said this? So I ended up having to Google play catch with my son and cut and paste that in. Okay, there's actually something more about that I want to talk about, and I totally forgot to cover it. An adaptive technique that I've been using for the last not quite quarter century, basically since I went off to college, so sometime in my undergrad I learned this, is that if you need to spell check something, you Google a sentence with the word in question. This is really good when you're having trouble figuring out at all how to check the word, or you're afraid that you're going to get a wrong word in there. Like this word is really suspect to you. You don't know if it's the right word or if it's something completely different. And so what you do is you Google a sentence. Now, quite often you may as well just Google the sentence you're going to use. It's probably perfectly good. And then, of course, your hits in Google presumably are going to be about the thing you just Googled. And if they're not, you know something's wrong. So if I type the word check in, if I type the word catch in there and I get a whole bunch of information about bank accounts, then I know that's not the word check, it's the word catch, which I have been messing up so many times during this video. It's ridiculous. Anyways, there's a problem though. One of the new anti-AI techniques is to track changes. So you have the students track changes, and then if they cut and paste a bunch of text in, that looks really suspicious. Like, okay, are you plagiarizing from somewhere? Are you plagiarizing from an AI? What's going on there? Well, if you're doing this approach, well, if I'm going to write a sentence, I might as well put that into the browser. I might as well just type that straight into Google, Google it, let it spell check clean it up. I check to make sure that the topic seems right, and then that part of a sentence I cut and paste into my document. This is normal everyday stuff. I do this a ton, especially when Grammarly is not helping me out too much for whatever reason. But if you're tracking changes and you are being very, anti-AI, looking at students very critically, kind of assuming what they're doing is maybe cheating, this is going to look a bit sus. Once again, these are critical adaptive strategies that neurodivergent students need to implement. And presumably English language learners. I'm not an English language learner, I'm a native speaker, but I'm assuming they're doing something similar. At least if I was learning a different language, I would probably be taking some more strategies. Okay, so I wanted to add that in. So it was in the video. So with that said, back to our previously scheduled video. The other issue I have, and this is a little bit kind of a different level, is for a lot of us, once again, potentially neurodivergent, not all of neurodivergents, but definitely us dyslexics, as well as English language learners. Hey, you remember that cliff? The 30-footer that, hopefully is this nice smooth thing that the AI flattened? Well, that wasn't a smooth trip for us, For a neurotypical individual, yeah, maybe this is a 35-foot cliff with a nice smooth slope. But for myself as dyslexic, hey, there's other challenges. I'm having to deal with the whole dyslexic thing. It's not a smooth slope. I've already got cliffs in my path that I basically can't cover. And I'll be honest, individuals like tutoring centers, even writing instructors, are generally pretty much useless. Most writing tutors have been trained not to help in the ways that we dyslexics need help in there. It's like, okay, you're not supposed to cover any grammatical issues or spelling issues, or why am I here? Why would I bother? I went to the writing center as an undergraduate for basically 4 years, and it was basically useless. The most impactful and helpful part was when I was writing my dissertation after my advisor would hand it back and go, this is so bad I can't even give you feedback. It's absolute trash, which is, shall we say, not something that helps one's self-confidence, to say the least. Was my childhood best friend going over it line by line, going, okay, here's the sentence you need. You're going to have to put a semicolon in here, or you can break this in half, or here's how you do this, here's how you do this. Okay, this sentence can be 2 sentences. Hey, these 2 sentences can be 1, that kind of thing. I learned a ton that afternoon. That one afternoon was, in many respects, more beneficial to me than all of my writing, formal writing education. If by any chance you're watching, Brian, thank you so much. That was so impactful. You really helped me, and I cannot say thank you enough. So using AI definitely can help out a lot. Grammarly goes through and does for me what my friend did. maybe not as well. Not maybe, not as well. But it shows me what I'm wrong, lets me fix it, gives me full control, and also catches the spelling of really weird words. It can handle chemistry. Anything short of like the really obscure UPAC names or something, it usually gets them. It's not 100%. The trick on using AI quite often is to take only half of its suggestions. And the skill in using the AI is to know which half to take. But where I'm getting here is that when we have zero AI policies, and Grammarly is now getting flagged as AI, and it's being said, no, you can't use Grammarly either. It's not just ChatGPT. If we're thinking in universal design approaches, this is very detrimental to those of us who are neurodivergent. Once again, I'm going to say especially those of us who are dyslexic. I suspect it is more than just the dyslexic crowd. Same would go for English language learners, I presume. I'm monolingual English, so I don't know, but I would assume the same would go for English language learners. Now, accommodation exists for a reason, but especially in higher education, I do feel that universal design really should be a thing. And while Grammarly does have generative text abilities, especially in Grammarly Go, they are frankly not very good. But also, the future is kind of AI. It is an important tool that we need to learn. And sometimes those tools are more important for some individuals than others, but it doesn't mean they're unimportant for everyone. So I'm a big proponent of universal design. It is insanely hard. I am not where I want to be with that. There are definitely areas where implementing universal design practices, I am dreadfully inadequate. I'm trying. But when it comes to a lot of the AI policies, I think we can do a pretty straightforward, go ahead and use AI, put some guide rails on it. But think both for those who need it and frankly for the vast majority of the population whom it's probably going to be of help. It's probably going to be useful. At the very least, allow Grammarly and other advanced AI-based spell checkers. If they give you full control over your work, they're still yours. And if a student, does only as good as the AI, then maybe that shouldn't be passing, because that's not a reason for them to ever be hired. That's not a value add. And by the time you're in college, you should be kind of at the top of that learning curve. Once again, college and K-12 are two different kettles of fish. And I do realize that those are two very different worlds. And so a lot of this is aimed at a college audience. So I think I've bounced around enough to kill 2 batteries. Well, I killed 1 battery. This next one's doing fine. But I think I've talked enough. So have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in later videos.